So, this year I stopped being a homeowner, basically saying I sold my personal property. Now I have cash. With this cash, I want to buy rental property. Now, the question is, how much money do I actually need to save to be able to actually buy rental property? In this video, I'm going to break it down, and you can actually invest a lot of money. So you need to save a lot of money, or you can be in the game for as little as 0%. As you watch this video, you'll see exactly how to do it. But most importantly, in this video, I'm also going to give you a personal budget to be able to save as much money as possible to be able to get into the real estate game. And as always, guys, like this video and top out also subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified. Now, the very first thing, guys, you got to understand that there are 3 ways to get into the real estate game, okay? And all these ways have their pros and cons, have their risks, and it all depends the type of person you actually are and the type of investor you actually want to be. One of the first ways is going to be going all cash in a deal. Basically saying, if you have $100K to buy a property that costs $100K, that's great. You buy it outright. Now, who is this for? This is for people that basically don't want to be borrowing money. They're very risk averse and they just rather basically wait patiently, have the cash, buy that property. And the benefit is that, hey, all the money that comes in from rents goes straight into their pockets. But the con is all the cash they have is into this one deal, and it requires a lot of money to actually get into the next deal. That's the idea. Now, way number 2, guys, is going to be getting into real estate by buying REITs, okay? Real estate investment trusts, okay? This is for people that don't really want to actively manage a property and they don't actually want to put down a lot of money. So instead, they buy REITs, which are basically like little stocks or trusts on the market that you're actually able to buy shares into, okay? Basically saying I can buy an index like VNQ, which basically holds real estate. And what happens is when I buy this real estate mutual fund, right, I own it now, I get paid dividends from the profits the properties actually make. As the properties actually appreciate, hey, the value also goes up, okay? So that's one way to get into it, but I don't have to clean any toilets. I just get paid money, and that's the whole idea. But it also means, hey, con is, you don't have that much control over anything, and you don't have that much controls over the profits either. So you kind of just get whatever you get. Now, the third way is going to be basically by using other people's money, which is one of the most popular ways. It basically means, hey, you're borrowing money from the bank or a private lender, and you're gonna go out there and basically invest money. Now, this basically means that, hey, there is more risk associated. You are doing the managing of the property usually. So it's for people that don't mind taking on that much risk and also don't mind actively holding this property. That's the idea. So you have all the way at the top, pay all cash. Number 2, buying REITs. Number 3, using other people's money. They all have their pros. They all have their cons. So it's all up to you and how you actually want to get involved in this game. Now, since most of us watching this video don't have $100K or $200K to buy all cash, and most of us aren't interested, for example, buying REITs, most of us are probably going to get into, for example, using other people's money. Now, how much money do you need to save up to actually be able to buy real estate this way? The answer is it all depends. 1, it depends on your market. Some markets, hey, New York is like 500, 700K for a property. Ohio might be like 80, 150, 150K. So it all really depends on the market. But let's just assume we're looking at a $100,000 property in your area. And you have a few options about how you actually go into it. So for example, let's say you have option A. You're going to get a conventional loan. Now, obviously, you're going to go to a bank. You're going to go to credit unions. You're going to go trying to find the best rates and the best deal possible when it comes to borrowing this money to buy this property. Now, let's assume you're going to go into a conventional loan, which usually requires you to put down between 10 to 20%. And by the way, when you're usually going to be buying a property, you have 2 main expenses. You're probably going to be, for example, hey, the down payment, which, by the way, you don't really lose in a way, right? Because that money goes down for the property. That's your equity in the property. And the only way you actually can lose that if it's actually you buy a property for 100K that's actually only worth about 50K, right? So that's pretty terrible. Now, it doesn't happen right then, but if the market does switch because you were buying during a time when real estate was actually overvalued, hey, now you own a property that's like not really worth that much. And that's not what you want to look at, but let's leave that for another video. But the goal is, hey, you're going to put down your down payment, and you also have the closing costs, okay, which are usually between 2 to 6% on average. Now, for this math here, I'm going to use 6% on the higher end, just for like, because whenever you're going to calculate expenses, you want to calculate expenses at the higher end, and whenever you're going to calculate income, you want to calculate income at the lower end. This way, if you make more money, great. If you spend less money, awesome, because it's still covered. That's the idea there. So you're looking at 20% for the down payment. Let's say that's 20K, obviously, and 6% for the entire closing cost is about like 6K. So altogether, you need $26,000. So usually, I would set aside about 20% for the loan as a down payment, and then about 6% for closing costs. So that's how much you need to actually save up. But again, it all depends on your market price. So if you're looking at an area where properties are like 200K, well, say I'm going to put down 10% or 20%. So calculate what that is, and then calculate 6% for closing costs, and then calculate what that is, and then sum up both numbers, and that gives you the total amount of money you actually need to save up. Now, option B is going to be, hey, I want to buy a property. I don't have that much money for a down payment, but I'm actually going to buy it to live in it first and then eventually go ahead and rent it out, which usually comes down either to, for example, a house hacking, or getting, for example, an FHA loan, which basically means first time home buyer loan. And what you basically do is you can put down a down payment of about 3.5%. And closing costs are still about between 2 to 6%. Let's say 6%, like for fun here. So you're looking at $3,500 plus $6,000, that's $9,500. That's how much you actually need, and that's a lot less than $26,000. And the cool thing is, when you get an FHA loan, you can get into this property, but you need to stay in there for at least a year to then be able to actually give it up and then go ahead and rent it out to somebody else. That is the whole idea, all right? And when you get an FHA loan, you can kind of get into it, for example, having a lower credit score than usual. That is the idea. They are a little bit less strict because, again, the government is going to be covering your loan if anything does go wrong. Now, the third option, option C here, is going to be creative financing. And I've actually heard of somebody that actually did this personally. And what they did is they say, hey, okay, I'm going to get into this deal. I'm going to live in it, right, for at least a year. So that's 3.5%. That's $3,500. Closing cost $6,000, $9,500, but I don't want to spend $9,500. So I'm going to go ahead and basically borrow $9,500 from somewhere else, right? Another lender, and use that money from the lender to give to the bank. And now I'm basically in the deal for about 0%. That is the idea. Now, there are obviously some pros and cons to doing things these ways, okay? So some of the pros are basically you have no skin in the game. And on top of that, you have your money still in your pocket and money for the next deal. Now, this sounds pretty cool, but there are some risks, right? Your payments are going to be higher. You have less equity. You also have more risk because you've borrowed a bunch of money and none of it is actually yours, right? That's kind of risky. And you also have PMI, private mortgage insurance, to actually worry about, which costs $1,000 or a few $1,000s every few months. I mean, every year, you know? Private mortgage insurance is the insurance that actually you pay that actually covers the lender in case you default. It's not insurance for you, it's for them, and you cover it on their behalf. That is the idea. So overall, my whole thing is I would not go into a deal with creative financing, and I would not go into a deal where I need to basically scratch myself into it by getting an FHA loan, okay? So I would really want to go into a deal when I'm putting down 10 to 20%, so I actually have some decent amount of equity into it, okay? So how can you save the most money possible? The answer is going to be you want to look into a bare bone budget or a baseline budget. And what that basically means is your survival number. How much money do you need to actually live on per month? Whatever that number is, you take that money, right? That's for your living costs, and all the extra money you actually use to actually save up for real estate. So for example, in any normal budget, you would say, hey, I make $4,000 a month. I'm going to save 20% of that, which is about like what, $800 a month if I'm not mistaken. And you might say, you know, in a few years, I'll have enough for the down payment or whatever. No, that's one way to do it. But another way is use a bare bone budget, which basically says you have 4 main costs: shelter, utilities, groceries, and transportation. Everything else is actually optional. You cut out all the bills you don't need. And now you might say, I made $4,000, but I only need to spend about $2,000. So I can actually save $2,000 extra every single month. So in 1 year, I save up about $24,000, which basically means I can actually buy a property a lot sooner than I actually thought. And if you wait 2 years or 3 years, well, now you can put down a much greater down payment and have a lot more equity in this deal. And the more equity you have in the deal, the less money you actually borrow. Well, when you actually get paid from your tenants, a lot more of that money goes into your pocket and not, for example, into paying the mortgage and everything else, okay? That is the idea behind it, okay, guys? So when it comes to how much money you actually need to borrow, or save to actually buy real estate, it all depends on your market. It all depends on your numbers and the type of loans you're actually going to get. But for me personally, when I'm going out there and I'm going to be looking at properties, I'm going to be looking at buying a deal where when I buy, I make money. So if properties in an area are going for 100K, I want to find one that's selling for about 80K to 50K. This way, when I buy, I have built-in equity. I want to put down between 20 to 50%, maybe even 50% to 100%. That's the whole idea, right? Because I want to have the least amount of borrowing money in there to lower my risk, because that's the type of person I actually am. And that's the whole idea. So I want to put down a large down payment, like 50% on this house. I want to find a bargain, and then I want to be able to pay it off first before I buy my next deal. My goal is not to have 20 properties where I owe money on all of them. My goal is to have 20 properties where I own 19 of them, and one I'm paying off to buy my 21st property later on, okay? That is the idea. Now, this idea, honestly, is a lot more boring. It's a lot more slower, but it's the way I want to do it, because in reality, I'm very risk averse in that way. But I'm willing to take on some risk initially. So putting down, property costs 100K, I put down 50K plus closing, and then in about 5 to 3 years or whatever, I'm finished paying off that property. Then I go to the next one. But now all that cash flow goes straight into my pocket. And now that cash flow I can use to pay off the next property, or save it for the next property, whatever it is. Okay, guys, so that's also an option. Guys, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the bell to get notified. Remember, you have closing costs, you have the down payment, but for the most part, that's basically it. There are the costs hey, you need to, for example, do some remodeling. You need to do some repairs, some rehab. You need to do some staging, get some furniture. Those are costs. But I'm talking about the cost to actually buy the deal. That's a little bit more different, all right? So if you're going to be looking to buy deals that need repairs, that's different. If you're looking to be able to buy a deal where it's turnkey, then that's also a different game. But thanks for watching, guys. Like, subscribe, hit the bell to get notified. Up here's another video. Over here's my face. As always, long-term team officially out. Peace.